Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Our first story today takes us to the happiest place on earth, Disneyland, where one dad's obsession with handicap privileges turned a family vacation into a parade of facepalm moments. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. We have the right. The father who missed the point entirely. Oh, this phrase makes my blood boil. The story's about my own dad. For context, I'm wheelchair-bound. My husband and I drove with my parents to LA so we could all go to Disneyland together. Long drive, lots of snacks, lots of complaining from the back seat, the usual family road trip experience. When we finally arrived at the hotel, we pulled into one of the two blue handicap spaces right across from the entrance. Perfect spot. We unloaded my chair, got all the bags out, checked in, and settled into our rooms. Everything was smooth. And then, once we were finally settled, I turned to my dad and asked him to go move the car. Dad, why? We're allowed to park there. Me, yes, but we don't need it anymore. Dad, so? We have the right to that spot. Me, summoning every ounce of patience I had left after a 6-hour car ride. We aren't using the car again for 5 days. Please move it to a regular spot so someone else who needs the blue space can use it. Dad thinks for a second and goes, "Oh, I guess that is the polite thing to do." Ugh. That one sentence had me internally screaming. Not angry screaming, just that quiet, exhausted, "Are you kidding me?" scream where you suddenly understand every flaw your parents ever had in crystal clear HD. My parents have always had a bit of entitlement baked into their personalities, but I was newly wheelchair-bound at that point. I hadn't yet seen what that entitlement looked like when combined with disability accommodations, and let me tell you, it was weirdly illuminating. It wasn't malicious, he wasn't trying to be cruel, he genuinely thought, we qualify for the perk, therefore we get to keep it as long as we want. It never even crossed his mind that these accommodations exist for practicality, not privilege. The idea of treating accessibility like something to safeguard for others wasn't on his radar until I spelled it out. And that wasn't even the only moment on that trip. Inside Disneyland, he acted like having me in a wheelchair meant we had VIP status everywhere we went. If there was an accessible line, he was practically speeding toward it. Half the time, I had to be the one saying, "Dad, that's not how this works." It was like watching a toddler discover a new button they weren't supposed to press. But the funniest, and by funniest I mean laugh so you don't scream moment, happened on the drive there. It was late at night, we were all tired, and we pulled off at a gas station rest stop. There was literally no one else there. The parking lot was basically empty. There were several wide open spaces directly in front of the entrance, well lit, convenient, obvious. So naturally, my dad parks in the blue handicap spot off to the side of the building. Not only was it completely unnecessary, it actually made me walk farther than the regular spots would have. At that point, I could still walk short distances, so we didn't even bother unloading the wheelchair. And there I was, hobbling across the lot past several perfectly fine parking spaces directly toward the one spot designed for people who can't do that. My dad didn't notice, didn't even think about it. He got out of the car, stretched, looked proud of himself for choosing what he thought was the correct spot. Meanwhile, I'm trudging behind him thinking, I guess I need to stretch my legs anyway. The whole trip was a crash course in how entitlement and good intentions can mix into the strangest cocktail. My dad genuinely thought he was being helpful, being proper, using the things meant for me. But sometimes access isn't about what you're allowed to take, it's about thinking beyond yourself. And apparently that lesson took a little longer than expected to sink in. Even with what he said, I think this is less about entitlement and more about the light bulb not going off for him at first, because he probably isn't used to using those spots in a vacation context. And honestly, I think many others with placards probably would have kept their cars there too. I think he just meant that he didn't think it was a requirement, and you being thoughtful helped him turn the light on and realize that he could do something kind. And our second story. Fired out of jealousy, paid $98,000 for revenge. My first job out of college was with an office supply and corporate infrastructure company. One of those firms that transforms empty office buildings into fully functioning headquarters. Interior architects, electricians, gardeners, IT teams, the whole machine. My role was coordinating the IT portion for large clients. If those clients requested special solutions, my time was billed at $600 an hour. It blew my mind, but on a multi-million-dollar contract, nobody blinked. The top boss at my branch was the kind of man who believed his salary made him a god, loud, arrogant, and absolutely convinced everyone existed to orbit him. He also happened to have a stunning assistant, smart, funny, charismatic. She and I clicked immediately, and we started having lunch together regularly. Unfortunately for her, the boss liked dragging her to lunch with him and the managerial clique. She hated it, so she'd come up with excuses and meet me instead, and I could tell her boss wasn't thrilled. Around this time, the sales department received a massive product database from several suppliers. The formats didn't match their system at all. They were panicking. I looked it over and told them I could create an importer and convert everything, but I'd need a few open blocks in my schedule. They were thrilled. That same week, the assistant invited me to a weekend party with her friends in a city 10 hours away. We both requested Monday and Tuesday off. She got approval, I didn't. No explanation. I knew exactly whose insecurity was involved, but frankly, spending time with her mattered more than appeasing a petty tyrant. Before we left, I assured the sales manager I'd deliver his tool the following week. He was relieved. They had major deals waiting for these updates. We took her company car and had an amazing weekend. On Monday morning, my boss called demanding I return immediately. I told him I was out of town and wouldn't be back until Wednesday. He said he'd approved my days off, but the top boss overrode him and was now threatening to fire me unless I magically teleported into the office. That confirmed everything. Wednesday, I walked into work and found my desk empty. The boss looked miserable when he told me I'd been fired. Everyone knew the real reason. The big boss didn't like that his assistant preferred my company. I packed my box, walked out, and drove straight to an attorney. The moment I explained what happened, the attorney almost laughed. He told me two things. First, I was still legally employed until a written termination was issued. Second, the company had violated several employment laws, firing me this way. He drafted a letter stating we were preparing to take them to court. What we didn't know was that the company was in the middle of a major acquisition. The last thing they needed was a lawsuit involving mistreated employees. Within days, a senior executive and corporate attorney flew out. They were furious at the local boss for creating a legal disaster. We settled for $50,000. After signing, the big boss, red-faced and trembling, told me he never wanted to see me again and that I was forbidden from doing any work for them ever. I smiled, nodded, and walked out. And here's where compliance became delicious. The sales manager called the next day in a panic. He had no one else who could finish the importer and database conversion. He apologized for everything and asked if I'd complete the work as a contractor. I told him I'd love to help, but the big boss had explicitly forbidden me from doing any work for the company. Unless the big boss personally rescinded that order in writing, I couldn't touch it. Silence. Then, I'll talk to him. 2 days later, I got the email. Not only had the big boss revoked his order, but he approved my consultant rate, the very same $600 an hour clients paid. I took my time. I did the importer tool, tested everything, documented it thoroughly, and completed the full conversion. Then I billed him for 40 hours for development and another 40 for implementation. 80 billable hours, $48,000. The merger went through shortly after. The new parent company reviewed the structure, interviewed key personnel, and took one look at the big boss's record of incompetence and liability level behavior. He was laid off. Last I heard, he was bouncing between contract roles, trying to sell oil field equipment out the back of a rented office in Texas, and every so often he runs into someone who remembers him, someone who got out because of him, someone who now has the pleasure of telling him exactly what he once screamed at us. F off! The brilliance of this story is that every move the big boss made put you in a better position. He denied your time off, so you left anyway. He fired you illegally, so you collected a settlement. He banned you from doing work, which forced sales to beg him to undo his own order. Then you billed them for high-end consultant hours they would have saved if he hadn't tried to flex his ego in the first place. And our next story. The potluck that wasn't optional, how I used compliance as a weapon. Years ago, I worked in a satellite office attached to a much larger department, more than 300 people scattered across multiple locations. Inside a giant corporation that somehow managed to feel like a high school cafeteria ruled by two mean girls in business casual. Half of us were salaried with benefits. The other half were hourly contractors treated like slightly upgraded office furniture. Guess which half I was in? The department was overseen by two vindictive women who delighted in cultivating a toxic environment. They proudly called themselves work sisters, constantly joking about their perfect bond. I used to say loudly, often, and not particularly joking, that with sisters like them, one of them usually ends up under Dorothy's house. Shockingly, this was not appreciated. Like most corporations, ours loved blowing smoke about how valued we were, but instead of raises, bonuses, or even functioning equipment, we got something far more meaningful, an appreciation potluck. There were going to be surprises. There were going to be treats. There was going to be team bonding. And then, of course, they revealed what those surprises were not going to include: food. The only thing the company actually provided was soft drinks, apparently the only allowable beverage on company property, except when alcohol magically appeared at leadership events. Food? Oh no, we were expected to cook that. Homemade dishes only? Nothing store-bought. We want to share love with each other. Translation: spend your own time and your own money so we can pretend this company cares. It didn't take long for the usual whispers to spread. People who didn't participate would be noted. Funny how optional things stop being optional once a manager starts keeping score. It was obnoxious for the salaried people, but for the hourly contractors, it was straight up insulting. We didn't even get health insurance, yet we were supposed to donate hours of unpaid labor to produce the illusion of corporate generosity. So I decided to make sure the higher-ups felt that sting loudly, publicly, and with enough precision to make HR sprout stress hives. 2 days before the potluck, I was on a call with my boss, one of the few reasonable people in the place, when she casually asked why I declined her Outlook invite for an event the next afternoon. Boss: hey, before we jump off, I noticed you declined my potluck invite tomorrow. Something going on? Me: oh, I just need to leave early to cook for it. My recipe takes about an hour, and the potluck is 2 hours after business hours. Since we can't go over 40 hours a week, I figured I'd leave 3 hours early to keep everything compliant. Boss: overtime? Me: well, yeah, I assume you can't authorize OT for a company-mandated event that takes place off the clock. She goes completely silent. Then, boss: wait, you expect to get paid for cooking? Me: half this staff is hourly contractors. Does this for-profit corporation expect 150 people to donate 3 hours of labor for their own appreciation meal? Boss: oh my God, nobody thought of how this looks. She was absolutely asking herself, not me. Me: or nobody expected anyone to call them on it. Boss: who gets called on it? Oh, you're at your desk. Everyone can hear you. Me: correct. Boss: I have to go. I genuinely did feel a little bad. She was stuck in the middle, but I also knew she would immediately launch that grenade upward where it belonged, straight into the laps of overpaid executives who were supposed to know better. Chaos ensued. Even from our satellite office miles away, we could practically smell the smoke. We weren't privy to the details, but word drifted down that people at the main office spent a day and a half running around trying to put out fires, redoing plans, rewriting memos, and figuring out how to avoid a potential HR disaster. Mission accomplished. In the end, the company moved the potluck to lunch so contractors would be paid for attending. In our little satellite office, we got pizza purchased by corporate, but only our office. They also instructed us not to be eating the pizza during the mandatory Skype call with the other offices because apparently watching the hourly peasants enjoy corporate-funded pepperoni might upset the people who were still being forced to cook their own appreciation meal. So we dutifully hid the pizza off camera while all the satellite offices awkwardly Skyped in like this was the Dunder Mifflin Infinity rollout. Corporate America, where appreciation comes from your own kitchen, but embarrassment is always on the house. Imagine running a department of 300 people and somehow forgetting that free food usually means the company buys food, then getting blindsided when your hourly staff points out that cooking for an unpaid event is unpaid work. I'm convinced the executives had to Google labor laws in real time. And our last story. His car wasn't stolen, it was entombed. If you know anything about Chicago winters, you know about dibs. For the uninitiated, dibs is the sacred unwritten rule of survival. If you shovel out a parking spot in the street, that spot is yours. All you have to do is put something in it. A lawn chair, a crate, an old table, literally anything, and everyone knows to leave it alone. It's not a polite suggestion, it's law. Chicago law. This winter, though, it wasn't just bad. It was one of those heavy, wet snowfalls that dump half the sky onto the street right before an Arctic blast rolls in. Basically, if you didn't claim your spot fast, you weren't getting it back until April. My dad's friend shoveled out the patch of street in front of his house so his elderly father could park close. Took him a solid chunk of time, and he was exhausted. He went inside for just a couple minutes to grab his dibs item, literally just long enough to warm his hands, and when he came back out, his neighbor had slid right into the spot like it was a parking lot heist. He told the neighbor, "Hey, that spot's for my dad." The neighbor smirked and said, "Doesn't look like you put dibs on it." And that was that. He walked away. Later that night, my dad's buddy quietly went outside, bundled up like a man with a mission. He grabbed a shovel and started building a ridge of snow around the neighbor's car, packing it tight, stacking it high, and shaping it into a nice frozen wall about a third of the way up the doors. Because the snow was heavy and wet, it held together perfectly. Then he brought out the garden hose. He filled every gap around the car, flooding beneath the frame, around the tires, under the wheel wells, and then he just went back inside. Because why interfere with the natural beauty of an incoming Arctic blast? By morning, that car was sealed into a solid block of ice. The wheels were frozen to the street, the doors were frozen shut, ice had packed itself up into part of the engine compartment. The neighbor couldn't even open the car, let alone move it. Cue the screaming. Cue the furious pounding on the door. The neighbor called the cops. They showed up, listened to both sides, and basically shrugged and said, "Well, you took someone's cleared spot. You kind of brought this on yourself." The car didn't move for months. Tow companies wouldn't touch it because it was literally fused to the ground. Spring thaw became the tow truck. And funny thing, that neighbor never tried to steal a dib spot again. And he never spoke to my dad's friend again either. Chicago winter justice. The fact the cops showed up, shrugged, and basically said, "Yeah, that's on you, champ," was the perfect stamp of approval. That car spent an entire season in timeout like a naughty child. Beautifully earned. Chicago winter doesn't forgive, but it teaches. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.